Members of Council, ladies and gentlemen, the clerk informs me that it is now 7 o'clock, so I will call this council meeting to order. And I would ask you please to stand and join with me in a moment of silent reflection in our national anthem, O Canada. Mr. Clerk, there are some announcements and amendments to tonight's agenda. Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship, members of Council. The Committee of Adjustment terms of reference, starting on page 125, still had reference to Ontario Municipal Board in a couple of places. Those have been changed to the Land Planning Appeals Tribunal, so that will be as amended at the appropriate time. Bylaw 118. Amendment is on your desk this evening. As you know, I will be moving into the position of interim commissioner due to Linda Lee's retirement for temporary position, and this is to backfill for my position. And the name on the bylaw is William Roberts. And third, items for consideration number 6 and the notice of motion have been pulled from the agenda at the request of Councillor Hamid.
Are there any questions with regards to any of those items that the clerk just mentioned? Not, we will proceed. Are there any disclosures by any member of council this evening? Councillor Challoner.
Thanks, Your Worship. With respect to CLMS-008-18, the Walk of Fame program, I am the founder and chairman of the Town of Milton Walk of Fame program. I nominated some of the individuals who are proposed to be inducted into the Walk of Fame on Saturday, February 23rd, 2019. I authored a portion of the report that is being considered by Milton Council. While I do not have a financial interest in this matter because there is none, nonetheless, I have an interest.
I thank you very much for that. And again, it is an in-camera item, so I suspect that we may not have to go into camera, but if there is one member of council that needs to, then of course, you know, Councillor Challoner, you'd have to excuse yourself from the discussion. But on the assumption that it is passed in open session, of course you can't vote on it, but you don't have to leave the room. So with that clarification, any other disclosures? If not, we will proceed. The resolution moved by Councillor Best and second by Councillor Di Lorenzo, and be it resolved that consent items numbers 1 to 14 be approved, save and accept item number 12. Councillor Best.
Item 10.
10. Any other item that any member of council has pulled out and dealt with separately? Being none, Councillor Best, number 10.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank staff for the report in terms of approving accessibility. Regarding the second item on the municipal election accessibility report, I approve of what staff are recommending, but I also ask staff to look at the potential for future online or mail-in ballots. I understand the City of Burlington used online balloting, and also other rural municipalities use mail-in ballots for people that are housebound, and it saves a bit of time in terms of staff time, in terms of doing special ballots and things like that. So I'd ask that staff look at this as potential, because the whole election process is evolving.
Clerk, Councillor Best just mentioned that it is duly noted and that will be looked into. So, is there any further on 10? If not, we will proceed. Those in favor of the resolution? That's carried. Members of council, I'll read out a fairly lengthy resolution here, but this is in reference to number 12 that we just pulled out of the consent agenda. A resolution moved by Councillor Betts and seconded by Councillor Di Lorenzo, and be it resolved that council approve the budget amendments and related funding sources as outlined on Schedule A, and that council approve the proposal awards for the professional consulting services roster for Section A, Civil Engineering Discipline, to CIMA Canada Inc., GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited, Hatch Corporation, Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions, and WSP Canada Group Limited for Section B, Landscape Architect Discipline, to Landscape Planning Limited, NAK Design Strategies, and MBTW Group Inc. for Section C, Facility Architecture Engineering Disciplines, to Morrison Hirschfield, WSP Canada Limited, KNYMH Inc. Architect, the Venton Group Limited, CK Engineering Inc., Building Exterior Consultants Inc., Reinders Limited, Chisholm Fleming and Associates Building Innovation Inc., and IRC Building Sciences Group Inc. The award will cover the period January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, with the option to renew for 2 additional one-year periods as outlined on Schedule B. And that council approve the single source award to Marsh Canada Limited for the 2019 excess WCIB policy premium in the total amount of $151,168, exclusive of taxes as outlined on Schedule C. And that council approve the contract to WSP Canada Limited for consulting services for Campbell Avenue Phase 3 design and contract administration services under the professional consulting services roster in the total estimate amount of $407,989, exclusive of HST as outlined on Schedule D. And the council approved the single sole source awards for 2019 as per the list of suppliers as outlined on Schedule E. And that the summary of the delegated authority awards until the end of the former term of council as outlined on Schedule F be received for information. And that the manager purchasing and risk management be authorized to execute the contract or contracts as outlined by the purchasing bylaw, and the mayor and the town clerk be authorized to sign any other required paperwork. Members of council, that will be the resolution that you'll be dealing with in a very short period of time. But we do have a delegation on that, and Marina Husson, I would invite her to the podium to present to council her thoughts on this item. Welcome.
Thanks. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Marina Houson. I'm a resident of Milton. I've lived here for 30 years and raised my family here. I'm an architect by profession, and after commuting for too many years, I established my business in Milton in 2006, working from my basement. Since then, we have grown, built a network of clients, and now employ five full-time professionals in my office. Green Propeller Design has been a business in Milton for 12 years. We're a firm of architects skilled in all aspects of development, planning, building, design, and construction, providing architectural services primarily to the institutional and commercial sectors. Architectural services includes not only designing new buildings and renovating existing interiors, but also technical projects like making buildings compliant with accessibility laws, fire code, also maintenance of buildings, replacing roofs, repairing leaky windows, and preparing feasibility studies to help our clients determine the best choices for future planning. We offer a full-service team, including architectural services, together with a variety of engineering sub-consultants, civil, structural, mechanical, and electrical. Yearly, our firm undertakes the construction of over $10 million worth of built work. Our portfolio includes police stations, parks facilities, industrial buildings, daycares, office interiors, amongst others. Currently, we are busy with a 30,000 square foot office building at the corner of Main and Bronte for a private client, a $4.5 million car dealership, and a private high school, in addition to many other smaller projects. Sorry if I'm running through this. I know I only have 10 minutes and I've timed it and I'm kind of at the limit, so I'm trying to fit it all in. We have worked and continue to work with municipalities all over the GTA, including Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Markham, Halton Hills, Guelph, Oakville, Burlington, and Milton. Additionally, we are currently working with the Region of Peel as a roster consultant on a variety of municipal facility projects. We have a reputation for customer service and for providing pragmatic solutions. We have been privileged to be a roster consultant to the town of Milton from 2013 to 2018. We have worked on a number of town of Milton projects that you may know, the Innovation Centre on Industrial Drive, various upgrades at the Milton Leisure Centre and the Milton Sports Centre, heritage repairs at Dusmet House and the old train station near the OPP building on Martin Street. In fact, our firm was also the lead consultant for the installation of the AV system that we're using right here in council chambers. During these 5 years, we have never received a negative performance evaluation from the town's purchasing department, and I believe we are trusted advisors. We have been building a relationship with the town over the last 12 years. We are familiar with the staff in the building and the planning and the engineering departments, familiar with the buildings that you own. We are around the corner. We are available at short notice to be on any project site in the community. We are confident that we are truly well qualified to undertake any facility projects that the town needs an architect for. We submitted our credentials in response to RFP 18051 that has led to the recommendation you have before you this evening. We were disappointed not to be selected as one of the 17 firms that staff propose as roster consultants for the coming year and potentially for the coming 3 years. The evaluation criteria for the scoring of the submission included company background, scope of services, qualifications, composition, and special expertise relevant to the professional practice, relevant experience in the provision of prime consulting services in the municipal sector in Ontario, project approach and methodology, value-added services, and costing and fees. Of the 28 submissions received, only 2 were from local firms. The recommendation from staff is to award to 17 different firms, of which only 2 in the architectural category, and only 1 firm, an engineering firm, is from Milton. There are currently 6 architectural practices registered in Milton. One of those 6 submitted a proposal in response to the RFP for consultants, and we were not selected for the roster. Green Propeller Design has the appropriate experience and the skills to address any assignment that the town would have for design and construction, repair and maintenance of the town's building assets. It is not for lack of qualifications nor experience that we have been omitted from the list. The RFP stated that up to 5 firms would be awarded contracts in each discipline. In the architecture discipline, only 2 firms have been recommended. The RFP includes several statements about pursuing community benefits as part of our long-term procurement strategy. Not only are we a local business, but we welcome local high school students into our office as part of their co-op placements. We mentor local students curious about pursuing architecture as a profession. Several of our employees walk and bike to work. We are active in community services. We participate in the coldest night of the year, Heart and Stroke, Arts Milton, Chamber of Commerce, and the Economic Development Advisory Committee, amongst others. We want to live local, and we do buy local. I personally and my firm Green Propeller Design are keen to provide services to the town. We want to grow with the town. We want to thrive as we work towards our shared vision for our community. We value our relationship with the town. It is disappointing to learn that in spite of our suitability and our enthusiasm, that the scoring criteria did not work in our favor. I'm not suggesting that there was any error made in the scoring, nor am I suggesting that the firms chosen are not worthy. What I am saying is that if there are properly qualified professionals within the Milton business community, we should be the first to be selected. If I was trying to hire an employee from outside Canada, under Canada's immigration rules, I would first have to prove that there is no suitable Canadian available to do the job. Similarly, I think it should be incumbent on you as council to ensure that you hire local professionals if they have the required skills and experience before you entertain people from outside our community. It is in the best interest of this community to support local businesses whenever possible. If as council you want to support local business, you have the opportunity to do so through the purchasing of goods and services from local businesses. You can do this by adding a firm to your services on a roster, or you could do it by having a firm on a retainer. As a licensed architect with 35 years of professional experience, a strong portfolio in municipal, institutional, and commercial sectors, a member of this community and an advocate for the town, familiar with staff, administration, and the buildings of the town, I cannot imagine why the town would not be enthusiastic about having us available to assist you. The benefits of using Green Propeller Design are clear. We have the skills and experience needed to respond to the town's requirement. We are familiar with the town's staff, procedures, and the town's buildings. We are available at short notice, and we don't spend any billable time, nor carbon fuels, driving from distant places to come to Milton. As council, you have the ability to make this process better for local businesses, and we ask that you consider this as a request to do what you can to support us. Thank you for your time.
And I thank you very much. If you would just remain there for a moment, I'll determine if there's any questions of you. Members of council, Councillor Chandler.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just have one question of the delegation. It relates to the process. So, in your mind, were the appropriate questions asked of you that enabled you to put your best foot forward? Or were there things that you left off about your organization that might have helped you in the decision-making process?
I think the questions were appropriate, and I did answer them very fully, including the ones about the community benefits. I think potentially the scoring mechanism didn't work in our favor because of the amount of points that are allocated to the things that would have favored us and not to other things.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor Best.
Not to the delegation, it's the staff.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a moment. Any further questions of the delegation? If not, I thank you very much. Mr. Cowan, I know he's the individual that's charged now with that responsibility. Glenn, if you would please, to Councillor Best.
Yes, through staff. It's a question regarding the recommendation here. Could you just briefly highlight the process that you go through in terms of putting companies on the consultants list? And also, is there any chance for reconsideration through the year? Because I can understand both points of view here. I just wanted to see if there is a chance when a project does come up, because I know the town does a number of projects through the year.
Through the Mayor, the process we follow, as outlined here, we establish the roster process based on the scoring criteria. We do limit or target within each of the categories an appropriate number of firms that ensures that there's adequate work over the roster period for those firms. Within the roster period, there are opportunities and times where we do go outside the roster to a competitive process where it's warranted, and we reserve that right within the purchasing bylaw. Further to that, and I'm not sure if maybe this is the correct time to answer, there's some additional commentary with respect to the local piece I think is important for council to be aware of. So if I can just speak quickly to that. I'll just make sure I get the term right here. The Discriminatory Business Practices Act is referred to in our purchasing bylaw and is a legislation that we have to follow. It precludes using local preference as a criteria in selecting firms. So in terms of our scoring criteria, that's the strongest reason why you don't see that in the scoring criteria. It's just not allowed under legislation.
Thank you. And just a follow-up. Do other municipalities have the same scoring criteria, or is it based on each municipality having their own type of a scoring?
We look to what the common and best practice is. There's definitely going to be variations in terms of the weighting between categories, but it's pretty standard in terms of the project's experience, the method, the approach that would be utilized, the costing information. Those are all pretty normal and typical within roster and RFP evaluations.
That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Di Lorenzo.
The question I had was in regards to scoring for local businesses, and Mr. Cowan answered that question about the discriminatory policy. That's legislated for us to have to follow, so I have no questions.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the item? You've heard the resolution that I read out a few moments ago. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion. 1, 2, 3. That's carried. Now, members of council, the first item for consideration of resolution moved by Councillor Challoner, second by Councillor Cluett. Be it resolved that council adopt an initial opt-out position with respect to retail cannabis stores. Number 2, that council direct the town clerk to notify the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario Registrar prior to January 22nd, 2019 of council's decision to opt out of permitting retail cannabis stores in the town of Milton. And that staff be directed to report back to council to reconsider opting out once more complete information becomes available, but no later than December 2019. Number 4, notwithstanding reconsideration rules in the town's procedure bylaw, a simple majority may be required to make a final decision on opting in or opting out. So that, members of council, is the resolution that we will be dealing with. And Ms. Sales will be making a presentation, but clarification on that, Councillor Di Lorenzo?
No, it was for comments after. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sales?
Good evening. I am pleased to be here tonight to answer any questions about the cannabis update and retail stores direction report. As you're aware, there's been much public discussion on the subject and many questions and unknowns as both the current and former provincial governments work their way through the legislation and regulations, including different operating models. At the highest level, I would like to underscore a few key messages for you. Private retail cannabis stores will be open for business in Ontario on April 1st, 2019. Municipal governments have a one-time opportunity to opt out of allowing retail cannabis stores in their community. The decision to opt out must be made by January 22nd, 2019 and may be reversed at a later date. The decision to opt out, if a decision to opt out is not made by that date, a municipality will be opted in by default. If a municipality opts in, that decision may not be reversed. Under the legislation, private cannabis retailers are permitted to establish in areas zoned for commercial retail uses, and the legislation only restricts them from locating within 150 meters of a school. The legislation does not provide for any opportunity for a municipality to further regulate the location or number of retailers through its zoning bylaw. The Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario will license cannabis retailers in Ontario. The 15-day AGCO public notice process is detailed in the report. And lastly, the town of Milton has received notice that of the initial provincial funding, Milton will receive $46,600 to be used to address implementation costs directly related to legalization of recreational cannabis. Since this report was circulated to you last week, the province has announced further information, a phased approach to cannabis licensing due to supply issues. The initial phase will include up to 25 licenses to be issued. The AGCO will implement a lottery system to determine who is eligible for the initial licenses to legally operate a store in Ontario. A number of staff have worked on this file and are here with me tonight to answer any specific questions that you may have.
I thank you very much for that. Councillor Cluett and Councillor Di Lorenzo, I believe, had questions of staff.
Here, okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks for the report. It obviously over the last number of weeks has changed drastically. I'll preface this because I was during the last campaign talked about having a town hall or see if we can have staff to have a town hall, but the facts were changing so rapidly. We didn't want to obviously put out the incorrect information. You mentioned that obviously, and I'm speaking of recent changes. Last Friday, after Toronto, City of Toronto opted in, that's when they announced that the lottery was going to happen with the 25 number of outlets. Has that fact, seeing as it's so small of a number, swayed staff in any ways from this recommendation at all, or a little bit more comfort or a little bit less comfort?
The 25 store from the initial phase is just an initial phase. There's not clarity on how long that phase will take place. It could be very brief. It is due to supply chain issues nationally, and it is not as a result of the City of Toronto's discussion on the subject.
Thank you. And with the report on the page 11, for everybody who's following along with the map with all the business zones, there's been a number of concerns that were raised. One of them was people who are in the sort of the live-work units at, let's say, Darien Thompson and James Snow Parkway in Main Street area. And I don't know if this is a zoning question for planning, but will these cannabis outlets be allowed in those facilities?
Good evening. I apologize, I don't have a copy of the actual zoning bylaw with me tonight, but the question with respect to the live-work units at Darien Thompson and on Main Street, I believe that...
Maybe if you could just get a little closer to the mic.
Sure, sorry. I believe that the live-work units on Main Street do permit retail stores, so the possibility of a cannabis retail store, it would be permitted in that location. The live-works at Darien Thompson, they do permit retail, but there are some specific definitions with respect to the types of retail stores permitted in that location. I would really need to look at the bylaw to determine whether cannabis retail would fit into one of those categories.
Okay, the main reason why I'm asking is that it's concerning the people who live in the units above, and we all know that the aroma of cannabis will rise, and there could be health issues. So I just wanted to, that's why I wanted to find out if there was an exemption for those areas, for those types of. And I know that it's not very clear, and maybe staff can send out something to council at some point afterwards, regardless of the decision that is made here today, just to clarify that, because that would require, I would consider, that would require ventilation systems to be put in place in order for, same thing with restaurants, or if you have food preparation in those things. So that's why I want to make sure that that's clear, that these are going to be options for these outlets that will really be outside of our local control.
I understand that odor is definitely an issue with respect to production facilities where cannabis is actually grown in a retail type of environment where everything is packaged. I'm not sure that odor would be the same kind of concern, but we are permitted through the commenting, the 15-day commenting window to comment on matters of public interest, and protecting youth is one of those things. So if we were to come across a proposal for a retail location in a live-work situation where, you know, we do have residents who are very close, there could be youth who reside there, staff could certainly comment on that basis. But the decision lies with the AGCO as to whether or not the license will ultimately be issued.
Thank you. I'm finished with questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cluett. Just before I get to Councillor Di Lorenzo, just one quick editorial on the question there. And of course, the question was with the live work, but I know I've also been questioned on apartment buildings and as well condos as to what evolves. There's a lot of it that's really not clear, at least not to me as well. So, Councillor Di Lorenzo.
I had comments, not questions for staff, so comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for comments on the report, I've read the report very fully, and I thank town staff for preparing it, and I've done as much research as I can. I'm currently not in favor of the opt-out approach. I don't want people being pushed into an illegal market where there is no regulation and control. We all have on our desks right now a news story saying that there was an illegal cannabis dispensary raided in Milton just recently last week, and arrests are made. The Toronto health officer in the report to Toronto Council weighed in saying that there would be more harm to the public health when cannabis is not available readily in the municipality, because it drives more people to purchase it illegally where there's no health and safety measures in control for it. And I'd rather see, if Milton residents are looking to purchase it in Milton, have those jobs and business in Milton, and not drive business out. We do have a 15-day period where the town of Milton can let the province know if they think the location is not in the public's interests, or if they think the location is against the residents' wishes. I realize that is not the zoning control we're used to having, and there's no guarantees that the province would have to listen to the municipality's wishes. I remind council members I can purchase cigarettes from literally hundreds of locations. People can purchase beer and alcohol across from public high schools in Milton. I look at gambling, addiction, alcohol, nicotine, tobacco, all more concerns for public health and safety than I do with this. And I feel if we take the opt-out approach now, we're going to lose out on both jobs and investment in Milton, and we're going to continue to promote an illegal market in the town of Milton and continue to have that market endanger people's health and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, members of council. And again, if there's any questions of staff, we'll get to that as well. But if anybody's got any comments, they're more than welcome to, because this is an issue that's got to be sorted out. So, Councillor Melbouf, Councillor Best, Councillor Ellie, Councillor Hamid, and Councillor Tesser-Dirksen, in that order. Councillor Melbouf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions for staff, and then I'll allow the other questions to be asked, and then I'll have comments after, once I hear the answers. So, just a quick question. Do we have any indication of what the other Halton regional municipalities will be doing?
Ms. Sales?
My understanding is that Burlington is discussing it this evening. Burlington's report indicates that they believe that Halton Hills and Oakville will opt out.
Did I hear proper? Burlington is recommending to opt in?
Burlington has not, staff has not made a recommendation in Burlington, so Burlington's council is discussing it this evening. My understanding is that Oakville and Halton Hills staff will recommend that their municipalities opt out.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, have the police, Halton Regional Police Services, made any indication or statement as to where they stand on this? Sorry. Have the Halton Regional Police Services made any statement or taken a position on the matter of opting in or out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Halton Regional Police Service have indicated that they will respond to complaints involving the illegal sale and distribution to youth. They will respond to complaints involving incidents of impaired driving, youth in possession of consuming cannabis, and cannabis consumption in a motor vehicle or boat. So that is the limit that we expect. The police believe that there's a normalization period of a year, at which point they will review what they are and are not responding to and what their hearing calls for.
And again, Councillor Melboof, with a small editorial from yours truly, I know there will be a cost to the region on implementing those issues, and I think that's probably where you're coming from, that Ms. Sells just alluded to. So it will be picked up by the property tax base for people in the region of Halton, so, as I understand it.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, but then again, if you put my name down on the comments list.
Councillor Best.
Yes, questions to staff. Further to Councillor De Lorenzo's questions, to whoever is available, does the town regulate in any way alcohol sales?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the town does not.
No. Does the town regulate cigarettes and cigar and tobacco products?
No.
Okay. And getting to my third question, what does staff expect to change in the next 12 months from the province or new information? Because we have Article 3 here, but no later than December 2019. I just want to find, are we expecting, or has the province indicated they're going to be changing their mind in any way?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a tricky question from the councillor. We didn't expect an update that we received only 2 or 3 days ago. So this file has certainly been a fluid one, and I suspect we're not quite done with announcements from the province on this file just yet.
Your Worship, I join Councillor Melboof. I have a few comments for later.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question for staff. On page 100, I see the urban zoning bylaw, and it says the minimum setbacks for a medical marijuana production facility is 70 meters from a lot with a school, hospital, place of worship, or a day nursery. And it's 70 meters. And from my understanding is that a storefront can also be open on that facility? I just want confirmation of that.
Maybe we go to Planning Department of Zoning on that issue.
Through you, Your Worship. The medical marijuana production facility regulations have been in the zoning bylaw for quite some time. The medical marijuana regulations came out well in advance of what we are dealing with now. The setbacks that are there, I believe they were consistent with the federal legislation that was brought forward to provide Canadians with access to medical marijuana. Those will be reviewed again by staff through this process because we do have to make some changes to address recreational cannabis production as well as the medical marijuana production.
Thank you for that. So would the same laws and regulations apply to recreation cannabis that we are using for medical marijuana production? So if anybody has a recreational cannabis production farm, can they open a storefront there where the 70 meters applies?
I guess that depends on the area that it's located in. Our rural bylaw right now doesn't have any specific definitions that capture cannabis production at all. So right now, the growing of cannabis is considered an agricultural operation. The zoning bylaw does have provisions in it right now for accessory farm produce retail markets, where there would be a possibility that, you know, if you're growing cannabis on the farm, that you could have a retail outlet there. In the urban area, if you do have medical marijuana production facility, the zoning bylaw does allow for accessory retail sales within the industrial zones, which is where the medical marijuana production is permitted. So there could also be a possibility of
The 70 meters being away from a school or a place of worship or a daycare.
Right, so assuming that the regulations stay the way that they are in the zoning bylaw, they would still need to meet those criteria to establish the use. But we do need to amend the bylaw to capture the recreational component as well. So likely a more general definition to just capture cannabis production. It doesn't really matter if it's for recreational or medical purposes, the land use is the same. And I do understand from the provincial legislation that a production facility could obtain a license for retail from that location. So those are all things that staff will consider when we look at possible amendments to the bylaw.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Ms. Sales, I think you might have something to further add.
Just a point of clarification that if council decides to opt out, that opt-out decision also applies to stores that are associated with any production facility. So though they are permitted per the legislation, the opt-out designation would also apply to those stores.
Councillor Ali, anything further?
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamid.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask was already asked, but I have a follow-up question to Councillor Best's question. And I actually don't know the answer. It's not a leading question. Zoning question. If somebody wanted to open, say, a cigar shop, a retail shop where there's all cigarette, not selling cigarette anywhere else, would they go through our zoning bylaw, or you might want to just stay up here? Yeah. It's a good exercise, though. Job benefit.
Through your worship, if someone were to make application for a retail store that only sold cigars or cigarettes or what have you, that would be considered just a retail store. Cannabis retail store would be considered also just a retail store, as defined currently in the zoning bylaw. So
that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tesser-Dirksen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have a question with respect to page 100, right at the top, and I'll just read it. It says, if Ontario's portion of the federal excise duty on recreational cannabis over the first 2 years of legalization exceeds $100 million, the province will provide 50% of the surplus only to municipalities that have opted in as of January 22nd, 2019. I know it's very premature to try and speculate on how much cannabis sales are projected to be over the first 2 years, but have staff looked at any similar municipalities or even in the US where marijuana has been legalized for a longer time to get an indication of what kind of sales the province might be looking at?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Cowan for that question.
Through the mayor, we have no further analysis that would give us any sort of expectation of how that current target threshold they've set relates to where we think it's going to end up. And in some of the comparable assessments we've done, or just looking at the research of others, I've yet to see a number that's taken a stab at measuring the adequacy of that threshold yet. So,
anything further, Councillor?
No further questions, but I may have a comment after.
Okay, I'll mark you down that too. Councillor Chandler.
Your Worship, I have just a question, and then you can put me at the end of the list for comments, or wherever I sit on the list. My question is around what we know of the funding today, Your Worship, in terms of how it's designated. So, and you alluded to it in terms of policing and how that's going to be picked up by the property taxpayer as much as we know today. So, Have any of staff, through your investigations, come to understand whether or not, in fact, there is funding available for policing, funding available for detection technology that's used on the street, you know, to deal with drivers who are impaired? Drug rehab facilities, mental health, neighborhood conflicts. Any funding been identified for those things at this point? And the reason I ask the questions, as you know, today in the province of Ontario, funding is provided for all those things related to alcohol, but not related to this at this point. Funding was just released this year for opioids in Ontario, and it's one-time funding at this point.
Mr. Cowan, I know those questions relate to funding and monies.
They do. The funding sources that we're aware of that are related to cannabis are the ones outlined here, that are based on that initial $40 million and the potential excess if the threshold is exceeded. Some of the services you spoke of do relate to services like policing that are provided at the regional level, where they'll have similar reports looking at what they think the potential impacts would be. I know there's been some coverage in the media recently from some of the other cities that have policing and speaking to the adequacy, or in that case inadequacy, of what they think the total cost may be. But for those services, specifically policing specifically, we haven't obviously undertaken analysis ourselves. We focused more on some of the things you've been hearing about, licensing and enforcement, communications, and the things that the town will be directly considering as it's implemented potentially.
Mr. Chandler?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll wait until it's my time to comment.
Thank you. Okay, I do have 4 listed individuals that have indicated they want to comment. And what I have right now is Councillor Melbove, Councillor Best, Councillor Tesser-Dirksen, and Councillor Chandler so far, and Councillor Di Lorenzo. Councillor Melbove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Initially, I was planning to support the opt-in, but upon further investigation, reading the legislation, reading the staff report, I've changed my position on this. One of the concerns I have is if we opt in, we as a municipality have no input and cannot limit how many stores would come into our community. That, I believe, should be at the municipal level as well. The province has already made decisions as to where these facilities, retail stores, would be located, again, undermining the jurisdiction of the municipality. So those are some of the concerns I have right now, the way the current legislation is written. But again, the other concern I have is the rules keep changing. The province keeps moving the goalposts. We don't know where we're going. Just 48 or 72 hours ago, it went from an open market, free-for-all, to 25 stores province-wide. Okay? Again, I look at that 25 stores, 5 are already allocated to Toronto. The Ottawa and London have opted in. How many are they going to get? So the other 441 municipalities will be divided between the 10 or 12 stores that are left. So that's why I don't see what the panic is, why we should rush into this. We're not going to get a store in the first allocation of the 25, that's for sure. So then, and I expect that if more municipalities opt out, as is what's going on, the province will look at this legislation and address the concerns that municipalities are expressing, and hopefully change the rules to put some of the control in our hands, since we're the ones who are responsible for it. So, again, we can always opt in later on once the rules are set. If we opt in, we can't opt out. We're committed. So I don't see any reason to jump into this. We lose nothing by waiting, and we have an opportunity to gain benefits for our community. So I'll be supporting the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Best?
Same predicament as Councillor Melbove. You look at this legislation, since it started at the federal level, it went down the provincial, kept on getting changed, and now what we have is a patchwork. We have some municipalities opting in, some out, almost like fluoride. And I don't want to go into that situation, Your Worship, but it's basically federal, provincial, and they basically give us to our level that we don't have the tools, we don't have the resources to manage this. And I agree with Councillor Malbuff that, you look at, we don't regulate alcohol, we don't regulate cigarettes, but in this type of situation, we're going from, quasi-legal, where we have medical marijuana, to fully legal without, as we highlighted here from the AMO report, 72 hours has changed. What's going to happen next week? We don't know. My concerns is that, we may know more next year, we may not. Guess what's going to happen in October? We have a federal election. Who knows what's going to happen then? So it's going to be a real fun situation here. And from what I can see is we just don't have the resources or the tools to do this job. And until the province gives us the tools, it's best to stay out and get them and basically advocate from all municipalities what we do need. Because I'm really concerned, as we just mentioned, with the live-work relationships that, as we've seen, and especially some of us that are campaigning that, it's the product is here now, it's being sold illegally. We have to make sure it's regulated properly. We don't want to go in at one step and then find out the province has changed the rules again or the federal government's changed the rules. So I'm in favor of opting out until we have it defined and everybody has their act together.
I thank you for that. Councillor Tesser-Dirksen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I share similar concerns to my colleagues with respect to the lack of clarity in the legislation. I think the provincial government has left things vague on purpose, perhaps, for now. I think the question we need to ask ourselves, though, is under what circumstances would we absolutely opt out forever? At what point would we look at legislation that's been refined by the province and say, we're stepping back, we want to have nothing to do with this? What would that have to look like? And I've tried to speculate, and I really can't imagine a situation where legislation like that would come from the province. How terrible would it have to be before we say we're opting out? So based on that, I believe there's more benefit to opting in at this point. And one of the points I wanted to raise with the question to staff was that this potential sharing of surplus in the sales. I just want to point out the example of Colorado. They have a population of 5.6 million people. Ontario has a population of 14 million. Colorado's sales of cannabis in last year exceeded $1.5 billion. That's with a B. So I believe there's an opportunity here for some significant revenue source, and that is only available to us pursuant to the current legislation, which could change, admittedly. That's only available to us if we opt in by January 22nd, 2019. There's a group of people who absolutely want us to opt out. And those people are the ones who are currently profiting from illegal sale of cannabis in our community, probably right at this moment as we speak. The people who are making money off illegal transactions, the people who are not paying taxes on these transactions, the people who are providing an unregulated, unmonitored, and potentially unsafe product to members of our community. I think the sooner we can take the wind out of their sails, the better. Thank you.
And I thank you, Councillor Challoner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think a couple of good points have been made by Councillor Malbuff and Councillor Best with respect to where we sit today in terms of legislation that we can support. I can't support this. I support the staff recommendation. I don't agree with opting in. I think this is yet another case of downloading by the federal government to the province to us with all the costs, no responsibility on their part, and we have very little opportunity to regulate. And we need this opportunity in this particular situation. I asked staff about, what they know of the funding and what it covers and what it doesn't cover. Bit of a loaded question, I admit. But it doesn't cover the things that are important, the things that today we do have responsibility for and we are funded for. Policing today is funded to deal with alcohol. The technology is in place to deal with impaired driving. There is money today that flows to drug rehab facilities with respect to alcohol and drug treatment. Mental health is supported today maybe not as well as it should be, but it is, as a result of the current alcohol and drug situation in our province. What is out there that isn't supported today, Your Worship, is neighborhood conflict, and it's already started, and it's going to continue, and it's our problem. And that needs to be managed with good people, and that costs money. I would say that if we're concerned about organized crime is playing both sides of the street on this one. They're already in the legal business in North America, and if you have any doubt about that, pick up the Globe and Mail from 6 weeks ago, section that ran on Saturday. The RCMP are currently investigating. They already have a significant presence in the so-called legal trade in North America, and that includes Canada. So they're already there. We're not keeping this substance away from anybody. It's going to be provided by organized crime, whether it's done with a certificate or not. They're already engaged. So I'm disappointed, quite frankly, where we are with this as a province. I thought they would have done better than this, quite frankly. I don't think that it meets our standards as a local government. It certainly doesn't meet my standards as a businessman. This is not how you conduct business. This is not how you conduct good government. And I hope, as Councillor Malbouf has indicated, and Councillor Best, that if enough municipalities opt out, the province is going to get the message that this isn't satisfactory, that it has to change, and we need more tools to effectively deal with this kind of retailing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Di Lorenzo.
We're not voting on consuming recreational marijuana. We're voting on opting in or opting out of the retail sales. So about the addiction or police, opting out just means, in my opinion, more police work. So I have spoken to a Halton Regional Police officer. Now, not on the record, but I asked the opinion, and the opinion is opt in. From a policing standpoint, the cost they have right now in the black market in forcing and busting illegal pot shops, they would much rather have it be retail shops legal in Milton, and it would have a lower impact on police. Now, realizing that's not the Halton Regional Police official position. Me speaking to a police officer on the street is not the same. But I hear council members talking about the greater cost to the Halton Regional Police if we opt in, and I'm wondering where that is coming from. That is the same type of anecdotes that I'm just saying right now. So for us, a council member saying that this is a greater cost to Halton Regional Police, it's not based on a report from Halton Regional Police, it's based on individual opinion, and I realize each of us have that. And then I heard also that we have no input at all to the locations. That is also not true. It says in the report there is a mechanism to give some input. It's comments, it's input. It's not us controlling yes or no, but we do have a mechanism for inputs. Then I heard that we lose nothing in waiting. Councillor Desser-Turkson already spoke more eloquently than me on that is also not true. We do lose things by waiting. While we were talking, Burlington just made a decision where they're looking to defer this decision until January 14th to give them some time to survey the community, to hear more public input and public survey on how, is the City of Burlington or Town of Burlington? City of Burlington feels on the issue. I have polled about 600 members, and in Ward 3 it was 66% in. Town of Milton as a whole, it was 63% in. I see where this is going. I would like us to see if we can defer this to January 14th. But the next question is, what's going to change from now and January 14th? I would like to ask town staff, is there any possibility for us to do a public engagement survey between now and January 14th to see where the residents in Milton stand on this? Because I'm saying I believe the residents in Milton are standing 63% opt-in, but realizing that's my survey. It's not a town of Milton survey. After all the council members have comments, I would like to put a motion to defer to January 14th council meeting if town staff are able to do any type of community survey to allow the residents of Milton give some feedback. This just went on the agenda on Thursday, so I know there's been some active Facebook polling since then in those limited 3 days, but I would like to see something more valid or something from the town of Milton if that was at all possible.
Okay, dealing with that, Councillor Di Lorenzo, Mr. Clerk, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our next council meeting is January 21st, I believe. If majority of council want to call a special council meeting for that, then I have no problem with that, but I don't personally think that that's necessary, so.
21st is okay. It's still I think it's 1 day before the deadline, right? So I'm sorry, 21st is fine with me.
Okay. I just want to throw that out for everybody's information. Councillor Di Lorenzo, you've still got the floor. Oh, Ms. Sales?
I'm still okay with 21st.
Okay. Ms. Sales?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, should council wish for us to do some public engagement, we certainly can. One of the challenges that I would put forward is that with the legislation and the regulations changing so quickly, it has been challenging to do public engagement to this point, and I can't assure you that the rules won't change while we were out to do some public engagement, but it is certainly possible, should council wish, we could come back on the 21st.
Again, Councillor Di Lorenzo, you still have the floor.
After members finish their comments and questions, I would like to defer this to the January 21st meeting, if that was possible.
Okay, the clerk will make a note of that, and so as I don't forget it, and we will deal with that. Councillor Cluett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Joining the around the horn commenting spree that we've got going on here. I again was going back in history when we first got this. My initial view was to opt out. After hearing from a number of people, I was sort of leaning into the opting in and listening to staff reports, sort of opting out, and then getting more and more information, opting in, and then so it's been a roundabout, and I almost need some cannabis now after all of this. But sitting here tonight to make this decision, someone had asked, what's the difference that 12 months can make, and I think 12 months can make a lot of difference from an advocacy point of view. Other councillors have mentioned, if more and more municipalities are not satisfied with the current regulations, the current legislation as it's written, the province, I think, will make it some changes. And we also have upcoming AMO conferences. I call to the attention to our AMO representative, who sits around this table as well, to speak out for not only Milton, but for Halton as well. And I'm very confident in his abilities to do that. So right now I support staff's recommendation. I don't know, again, and we have consulted the public. Facebook has its faults, and when Councillor Di Lorenzo mentioned his poll, that was on Facebook. We did have a very good poll during the last several months called the election campaign, and I can't put a percentage to it, but it's pretty much split down the middle from people, residents. But again, information that we had back in June or July isn't applicable now because that information has changed. So again, this is not opting out forever. We're not closing our minds to it. It's a legal product. I'm sure it's going to happen at some point, but I want it to be in the best interest of the town of Milton and the corporation of the town of Milton and the region of Halton. So opting out for now, which is what's clearly written in our staff report. It's not closing our eyes to it, sticking our head in the sand, going back to the 1960s and all the other fun things that we have been thrown at us the last few days. It's opting out for now, and I believe other municipalities, I believe Halton Hills tonight is discussing theirs. Their recommendation from staff, I believe, is to opt out for now, and I think April is their comeback date. So we have December, but it can come back at any time. Should we get more information, and if staff realizes in 3 months, hey, they've made the changes to make things a little bit more easier for municipalities, we can have that report brought to us. So again, we're not sticking our head in the sand. Revenues can be, you know, we could throw out numbers forever on this case, but I think right now, for the best interest of everything, is to opt out, and I'll stand with staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hamid.
Thank you. I was going to speak on it, but a couple of quick points. So initially, the conversation started talking about legalization versus not legalization, which is not really a question. About opting in versus opting out and serving the community, I can tell you the majority of people will probably want to opt in, and majority of council wants to opt in as well. The question isn't whether we should opt in absence of everything else. The question is whether the current legislation makes it a good idea to opt in at this point. That's the real question. And as far as surveying people is concerned, almost no one's going to read the entire report before voting. That's why we're elected. That's our job. That's not, our job is not to just ask public one simple question without any background. Our job is to do research and understand the background. Councilor Di Lorenzo mentioned that AGCO will take the community input, and he had mentioned that online a few times. So I called them today, and the answer was that we're developing policy. In fact, the answer to every single question I asked was, we're developing the policy. And I suspect that's a script they're told to read. Why would we want to opt in when the agency enforcing the policy hasn't even developed the policy yet? That's the real question. I mean, they don't know under which circumstance they would approve or not approve, in which location they would approve or not approve. If they themselves don't know, why are we going in? In fact, the entire issue with the CN project is that they're not going through the local planning process. And now we're going to opt in for something else that's also not going through the local planning process. How does that make any sense? And I think cannabis raises emotions. So let's remove that. Let's do a thought exercise. Let's say the province said you can opt out of auto body shop, but if you allow it, they can go anywhere retail's allowed. We would never opt in. We would say this is BS. If the province said you can opt out of tall condominiums, but if you opt in, they can go anywhere residential is allowed, we would never opt in. This is the same. The cannabis just throws people off. Delete that and think about a type of business that does not go through local control and can go anywhere. We actually have live work homes. Thank you for bringing it up, Councillor Clowett, because I was going to bring that up. We're looking forward to having more condos and apartments with retails at the bottom. Imagine renting a unit and a store moves in underneath, and you have children, you have smell, you have different issues. I don't know what the right answer is. What I do know is that local communities need to have control, and that's the reason Oakville opted out. That's the reason Halton Hills is opting out tonight. Mississauga opted out. Burlington deferred the decision. I don't know what decision they're going to make. And as far as deferring the decision is concerned, if we opt out tonight and something changes, we can opt right back in on January 21st, and nothing changes. Finally, Colorado numbers. So I was actually at AMO or FCM. Some of the councillors were there when Colorado came out. $1.5 billion in sales. They predicted it going down because they said it was an initial blip because of tourism. But the excise duty from it in Ontario, in Canada actually, would be $37.5 million, shared 50% with Ontario. That's $18.75 million. We only get the money if Ontario gets more than $100 million, and we get a surplus of that. For that, the sales will have to be over $10 billion a year. And it might be, but I don't know if it will be. It's not a whole lot of money we're talking about losing here. So let's make the right decision, and we can't make the right decision if we don't know what the rules are. How do you play a game if you don't know what the rules are? So let's wait until the rules are set up. We'll opt in sometime in summer or fall or whenever. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Ali, that's going to be a hard act to follow, but you're on.
I have a very small comment to make, is the fact that no municipal specific zoning restrictions are permitted. That line itself tells me that I need to opt out, because there's an area in Ward 4 of Milton on Rule Drive, that's a park. It's a Sunnymount Park, and on that park there's a spot where anybody could open a pot shop. That park is located in the neighborhood where families live with small kids. There is a splash pad with parents, and I take my kids there. I would never agree to something like that. So I am agreeing with the staff recommendation to opt out.
I thank you for that. And again, at the appropriate time, I'll have some comments. And as most you know, I don't, lead the debate. Never have, and hopefully never will. Now, for the second time, Councillor Melba.
Yeah, just very briefly, Councillor Mead expressed it very well, so there's not very much more to say. Just to address one of the comments made by Councillor Di Lorenzo, that by opting out, we would lose financially. We don't. We can opt in. Even if we opt out, we still get the $46,000 for within the first year. It's only if we decide to stay out that we could take a financial hit, but Councillor Mead expressed that that's minimal. So right now, we lose nothing by opting out, but we have an opportunity to gain some changes to this legislation that is much needed.
Okay, are there any further comments or any further questions of staff? Again, Councillor Di Lorenzo, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment, but I'll be guided by the clerk. I believe that what you're suggesting or recommending, probably an amendment to the motion that I have, and that's deferral to the 21st, I believe. But Mr. Clerk?
Your Worship, if there was a motion to postpone to the 21st, it would require a seconder, and it would take precedence over the main motion, so we would deal with that first.
Councillor Di Lorenzo.
I would like to put the motion on the floor. I'm not confident it's going to get support, but I would like to defer this to January 21st to allow us an opportunity to survey the public.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Second by Councillor Tesser-Dirksen. Comments on that? Being none, those in favor of that motion. Mr. Clerk, were you able to get it down? Okay. Those in favor of that motion, let's see your hands. Those opposed? It loses. Now back to the main motion. You heard me read it out earlier on. Everybody's got it in front of you. Are there any questions on this motion? If not, those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That carries.
So that's for consideration number 2.
Okay, this isn't that. Okay, members of council, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Chandler and seconded by Councillor Tesser-Dirksen, to be it resolved that council governance structure in this report be approved and the staff be directed to take all necessary steps to implement this decision, including presenting the necessary bylaw amendments to council for approval, and that the 2019 to 2022 schedule of meetings as attached as Appendix A be approved. Are there any questions on this report or this resolution? Councillor Best?
I'll have some comments.
Okay, any questions on this? Then Councillor Best, comments?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Best and then Councillor Cluett.
Let Councillor Cluett go ahead with the question. I have some comments and a motion.
Okay, questions, Councillor Cluett?
Just a quick question. I know that when we were discussing this, obviously making things, the decision-making process move a little bit faster, and we also were talking about seeing if we can get reports handed out to council faster than dropping them off on a Thursday and having us make a decision on on the following Monday. Just for clarification, this will help that process, getting council reports to us quicker before we, and a longer consultation period or review period?
Mr. Clerk, I'm not sure if that was a comment or a question, but I think rolled into it was both. Mr. Clerk?
Your Worship, this structure would help basically due to the limited number of staff doing the council secretariat function. However, if council wanted to stick with the committee of the whole system, then staff would look at a system to still push out the agendas, hopefully about a week beforehand.
Councillor Cluett, any further? Councillor Best?
Yes, first comment further to Councillor Cluett. It's not only just the time for councillors, but also for delegations because at present they have less than 2 business days to get there, and basically, it's online about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they have only to 10 o'clock Monday, so it doesn't give people a lot of time to actually ask their neighbors and come back with the council. The reason I'm concerned about this report, I indicated to the clerk earlier, if you look at this schedule, proposed schedule, 2019 starts with 16 meetings, 2020 13, 2021 15 meetings, and 2012 12 meetings of council. My concern is we have a very active provincial government, and after the budget coming this spring, I can see a lot of things coming down the pipe, such as a regional review, Planning Act changes, and who knows what other policies. As we saw with the cannabis report, you have 15 days to respond. Well, maybe council might want to get involved in some of those items too. Also, we have such things as tenders, planning approvals, and projects. I think that this is I'll go along with 2019, but I would ask that the schedule be reviewed annually, and I'll make that as a amendment to it. That we see, after a year, let's see how it's going, because the region, we only do these at a year at a time and then revise it, and we've revised it a few times. I asked staff about looking at 3-week cycles. That doesn't really work out with holiday Mondays. But I'm prepared to go for the first year. But let's just see how we're going, because we're a new council, we have a new provincial government, which, as we just saw, is coming up with things week by week. And we don't even know what next week's not going to bring.
And again, small editorial, Councillor Best, I support that that thought there with regards to the 1-year, review there. I have no problem. So I'm just wondering, and again, I heard you mention that you're prepared to move an amendment. I think it makes all the sense in the world, but Councillor Challoner, you being the mover and Councillor Tesser-Dirksen being the seconder, I'm just wondering if you two would have that incorporated in that motion that Councillor Best is suggesting. Mr. Clerk, I'm getting the nod from the mover and seconder to have that 1-year review that Councillor Best is suggesting.
So just for clarity, what I would suggest is the recommendation that would be before council for the vote is that the 2019 schedule of meetings as attached as Appendix A be approved. Then obviously staff have to come back for 20, 21, and 22.
Okay, with that clarification there, Councillor Best, any further?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and also just give you the opportunity for any emergency meetings to be called, because I got a feeling we may have 1 or 2 over the next couple of years, because it is a concern of mine of where the province is going, especially with the regional review. We may need to react faster, because there's going to be some changes coming down. Niagara region seems to be first. We could be in the next in line.
Again, as usual, as our procedural bylaw is that in the opinion of the mayor and the clerk and the CEO, we can call a special council meeting. And again, if there was a majority of council thinking that one was necessary, that can also happen as well. So we've had that happen on the odd occasion. It hasn't been used or abused rarely, but on the odd occasion it does have to happen. And Councillor Best, I think you're right. I think we're going to see some changes at the, not so much the local levels, but affecting some of the regions. I'm maybe a little bit hopeful that the region of Halton, for the most part, will be left alone, but who knows? But you're absolutely right. You singled out the region of Niagara there, and I believe that changes are coming there, and probably 2 or 3 other regions as well. So we have to be ready for that. So. It only was 1973 when we went through this again. I know that you're familiar with that, so here we go again. So, yeah. But with that inclusion into the main motion, and again, Councillor Challoner and Councillor Tesser-Dirksen has agreed to that. Any further discussion on it? If not, those in favour? That's carried. Yeah.
So is everything okay, and other than these ones being pulled out?
Members of council and ladies and gentlemen, the clerk and I were just having a brief discussion there, and right up front, I want to make mention that Councillor Challoner has asked for a deferral on this, and I'll be going to him in just a brief moment. but I'm going to read the resolution that I have before me. It's been moved by Councillor Di Lorenzo and seconded by Councillor Challoner, and be it resolved that Council approve the revised terms of reference attached as Appendix B to Report CORS-06918 as amended regarding the Committee of Adjustment. And the staff be directed to give effect to the recommendations of Report CORS-6918 to revise or delete any relevant policies and to present any bylaws to Council for approval as necessary. Councillor Challoner.
Thanks, Your Worship. So at the appropriate time, I'd like to ask Council to pull the Heritage Milton matter out from the what is recommended, voted on separately, and consider a motion that Councillor Tesser-Dirksen helped me with. She improved it greatly. Thank you. And it reads as follows, Your Worship. That the recommendation by town staff to disband Heritage Milton be deferred by Council to its meeting of February 11th, 2019, and further that town planning staff be directed to meet with representatives of Milton Historical Society and Nassagawe Historical Society in January 2019 to determine whether or not a mandate and makeup of Heritage Milton can be negotiated that fulfills the objective of preserving heritage interests in a manageable, cost-effective, and useful manner while maintaining a reasonable balance of burden on town resources and residents. And finally, the town planning staff report back to Council on February 11th, 2019 with its final recommendation for Council's consideration.
Thank you very much for that. And Mr. Clerk, I believe that that will take precedent and that should be voted on first. So, and can I assume Councillor Tesser-Dirksen that you're seconding that, seeing that you were singled out? Okay. Okay. With it properly moved and seconded, Councillor Best?
A point of clarification, Your Worship. We have 3 delegations on this item. Do we want to hear from them first or after we make a decision?
I was going to get to that. On the assumption that this motion passes, it would really all be for no. So I want to make that very clear, but majority of council, it's up to you. If it's coming back on the assumption that this passes, Mr. Clerk, correct me if I'm wrong. And that delegates would be welcome back to speak at that time, but if this passes, there really is no report tonight, so, you know, for Heritage Milton.
Your Worship, I just want to make sure they're informed so they understand what's going on here.
Well, I think I'm trying to do that right now. For them, and I got 3 listed delegations, but on the assumption that this passes, which I'm supportive of personally, and I suspect majority of us are, I don't know that, but then the presentation would be for no. So hopefully no one has an issue with that, because I'd hate for people just to get up here and really, you know, not get anywhere with it, because we're not going to be debating it. There's not going to be any resolutions or nothing whatsoever. But they will know for sure when we do deal with it. And I rather suspect, Councillor Challoner, that for those groups, I'm only speculating now, probably January, February, when this will likely be back.
Your Worship, it would be back on February 11th. February 11th.
So for those delegations there, certainly mark that down. The clerk's already got that slated. So with that, is everyone clear on the motion that's been approved, been properly moved and seconded by Councillor Challoner and Councillor Tesser-Dirksen? If there's no questions, those in favor of that motion? That's carried unanimously, I might add. So to those individuals that showed up here for this evening, you heard my comment, Mark, and there will be that communications, as Councillor Challoner has so ably mentioned. Mr. Clerk? Yeah, and the clerk mentions if you wish to speak to that, you know, in advance, certainly let the clerk's department know. Councillor Di Lorenzo?
On the main report, I had some items I wanted to vote on separately.
Yeah, and we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, Mr. Clerk, just help me here now, just so as we don't mess this up. And Councillor Di Lorenzo, have you? Yeah. The clerk, just to make very clear, clerk and I have had discussions on this, so I want to be very sure what we're dealing with.
Your Worship, because this is sort of an omnibus staff report, what I would suggest is that we use sort of the consent procedure as well. If nobody has concerns with the majority, then that is fine. But if people want a separate vote or discussion on any, please note, and we do fully expect Interview Committee, DBIA, and MEDAC to be 3 in particular.
Okay, Councillor Di Lorenzo.
Those were the 3 I had in mind.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, I'm going to suggest that we pull each one out individually and vote on them, okay, as to where we go or don't go with. So, Councillor Di Lorenzo, is anyone else, any other ones that they wish pulled out?
Just to clarify, the 3 were Interview Committee, DBIA, and MEDAC.
Clerk, and we're on 120 of our agenda with the MEDAC.
Oh, sorry,
Interview Committee. Councillor Di Lorenzo?
So on the interview committee, in speaking with the town clerk, I understand that some of the required changes for the provincial ombudsman is in regards to how we've been ranking and voting in a closed confidential session, and that cannot occur. We can still have discussions, we can still have interviews because there's a relate to an individual, but we can't have the ranking portion. So I would like to continue with the interview committee, but with those adjustments, so we're no longer ranking or voting in a confidential session. But I believe having town councillors on an interview committee I'd rather see us have that ability and not delegate it to town staff. I feel that interview committee has a lot of worth for us to meet with the candidates, ask them questions, and discuss with them. And as it has always been in the past, town council as a whole would always have to ratify those decisions, would always have the opportunity to make a change, would always have the opportunity to request someone else be added or removed. It doesn't take that away from the majority of town council. It doesn't take any recommendations, as always, still coming before this council to ratify and vote on.
Okay, thank you. Just before I get to Councillor Challoner and Councillor Best, I think, Mr. Clerk, make it very clear on the legal obligations that we have and the confidentiality that evolves around there, as I understand, Mr. Clerk, on what Councillor Di Lorenzo just alluded to.
Your Worship, regardless of whether this council chooses to retain the interview committee or have council undertake the role, the body cannot vote in camera on the candidates. Simple as that. Either body, neither can do it. Some of the other reasonings why staff are recommending disbanding of the interview committee are noted in the staff report, but truly, at the end of the day, there will be no change. Council makes the final decision.
Di Lorenzo, you still have the floor.
Yes, so again, I'm not sure if it's a motion or amendment, is to not disband the interview committee.
Okay, well, that's the prerogative of council, of course, Mr. Clerk.
Your Worship, in my opinion, and I'd mentioned this to Councillor Di Lorenzo, that would be a contrary motion because it's directly opposite to what's being recommended. So if this recommendation to disband the interview committee was voted down, that means status quo stays and we have an interview committee.
Councillor Di Lorenzo.
So I'm just looking for clarification. How do we vote on it? Like, how do we vote to? The mayor will call the vote. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. On that, Councillor Challoner, Councillor Best, and Councillor Hamid.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have some general questions, and then I have some very specific questions with respect to some of the committees. So, generally, Your Worship, I am supportive of reducing the size of some of these organizations, some of these committees. Having spent 15 years in a prior life around this table and served on a number of committees, you know, I see the pros and the cons, Your Worship. However, one thing that is a kind of a sticking point is absenteeism. You know, I firmly believe if you get the right person, that's never a problem. in the first place. However, what carrots and sticks do we have, Your Worship, to deal with people who are, they chronically miss meetings? Do the same rules apply to committees as do council? You miss 3, you're gone. What are the rules?
Your Worship, that depends on the various committees and boards and committees. Some of the advisory committees only meet a few times a year. In our current town policies, it talks about if they missed 33% of the meetings in the previous year, and motion is passed by the committee, council could then take termination. But ultimately, for citizen appointments, council has full authority to review and rescind appointments and appoint other people should attendance or any other issues arise that council wishes to deal with. Those flexibilities are put into all of the terms of reference that are under the council's jurisdiction.
Yeah. Well, Your Worship, I'd kind of asked through you to have staff take another look at that. It is a significant issue. It has been in the past. And if there's a way that we can make it very clear to people who choose to serve on these committees what the challenge is now with a smaller committee and what their obligations are with respect to regular attendance, however you decide to do it is fine. I had some conversations with staff, obviously prior to this meeting, around qualifications, and I don't know what staff is contemplating with respect to being more specific in terms of the prereqs to serve on certain committees, and certainly Committee of Adjustment is one, but there are others as well. And I would just ask that I think some thought be given to that. I'll give you an example, the community fund. It really would be nice to have some people on there with financial acumen, people who, in fact, have served on committees that have budgets. Perhaps those budgets are audited independently on an annual basis, because those are the kinds of things they're discussing in that committee when they're handing out that money. And it would be, I think, helpful to have that kind of acumen on that particular committee as an example. Your Worship, I think generally when I read through the terms, my general statement would be I think we need to be a little more specific in terms of some of the qualifications. With respect to the Milton Public Library Board, it really should be an odd number, not an even number. And how staff wants to go about that, I'm kind of curious. I guess I served on there for about 15 years. Certainly, if you want to make the number 7 instead of 8, I'd be supportive. Having dealt with that organization, as I said, for 15 years, I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference in terms of the decision-making process, but it's going to come back to, do people understand their obligations from the standpoint of absenteeism? Do we have people around that table who have a passion to serve on that board, and are they qualified? And I think that if you resolve those first 2 things, absenteeism is not an issue. Those are my comments, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Challoner. And I know Councillor Challoner was generalizing on 2 or 3 areas there. I know Councillor Di Lorenzo, you might be wondering if I forgot about what your issue was, and that's the interview committee. So I really want us to deal now just with the interview committee and get that one solved and sorted out, because I knew if we weren't careful, we'd run into a bit of confusion on this. One of the things, and again, Councillor Chandler, you had mentioned, the citizen appointments there, and I agree with the biggest majority of what you said. But with the interview committee, it's the interview committee of council. And I've chaired that for the last number of years, and the turnout for that has been pretty good. Rarely, someone misses. So, and let's just assume that it stays in place the way that you and I know it today, with the confidentiality and what the clerk just alluded to there as well. Then those appointments would be made, on January 21st, on the assumption that what Councillor De Lorenzo is suggesting, it would be 5 members of, assuming that we go for status quo, it would be 5 members of council. And the biggest majority of that work happens early in a new term. So most of the work that that committee would have likely would be probably February, March, April, somewhere in there. And then for the most part, that committee really doesn't do much for the rest of the term. On the odd occasion, somebody might resign or move away or something. You've got to deal with that, but it's rare. So just want to make mention of that. So let's just deal with the interview committee to start with. Then Councillor Chandler, I picked up and the clerk's made a note of it, such as the library board. When we get to that, we'll deal with that as well. Councillor Best.
Your Worship, I certainly endorse both councillors' comments. I would, when the motion does come, I would second Councillor Lorenzo's motion, because having served on the interview committee, it is worthwhile. I appreciate the work that staff do in shortlisting people with the technical qualifications. But as a council, we have to ensure that the people on these committees are representative of the community. You could have all the technical qualifications in the world, but if you're someone that's not going to do what the, is in the town interest, you don't want them on that committee. And I also agree with the odd number of committee members, because we have to make sure that we have, I know with the library board and others, it's mostly by consensus, but sometimes you may have to have an odd number there just to make sure we get the votes approved.
Mr. Clerk, and again, I knew that we were probably going to run into a little confusion on this evening. So, Mr. Clerk, just so is everyone very clear as to what's going to evolve here, hopefully shortly.
Your Worship, just to clarify for council members, there won't be a separate resolution to reconstitute interview committee. It would just be a vote on the staff recommendation to disband or not. If that is voted down, status quo stays.
Lorenzo, is that clear? It is to me now.
So if someone votes for, it's to disband the interview. If someone votes against, it's to keep the interview committee. Is that correct?
The question that would be posed to council would be, all those in favor of disbanding the interview committee, please raise your hands.
Thank you.
Okay, that's very clear to me. Councillor Hamid.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question for staff. So did I hear correctly the interview committee can no longer rank in camera?
Yes, you heard that correctly.
So does that mean that they will have to rank in public, or does that mean they can't rank at all and the council will have to rank?
What that means is interview committee or council in camera, if there is no more interview committee, can discuss the applicants in closed session, their attributes, what they may bring to the committee that they may be applying for. But interview committee nor council can, in closed session, rank those candidates. The vote, which is essentially ranking, has to be an open session.
My concern is that it will turn the interview committee into an extremely political process, because if I have to sit there and look at people who might have helped tremendously in my campaign who are not qualified, but they've helped in my campaign, and they sit across from me and say, we need your support, and tell them, no, that's not the right way to do this. I don't understand why we can't vote in camera, so we're voting based on merit and not based on politics.
I know the clerk didn't write this legislation. I think he's just trying to interpret it, Mr. Clerk.
The simple answer, Your Worship, is that the Ontario Ombudsman has said so under the closed meeting legislation.
Yeah, so my thought would be, if that's the case, and for as long as that's the case, I don't believe that we will make non-political decisions. I think we will make extremely political decisions. And so I'd be in favor of disbanding the community so staff can make technical decisions. And then as far as representation in the community is concerned, the council does have a final say. And I can see a scenario where council looks at recommendation coming from staff and sends it back to staff and say, look, there is no, for example, there's no one from rural community, or there's no one, there's no female in this community. So the council totally gets to do that, but the council will still do it in a general term as opposed to specific political terms. So I'm in favor of disbanding the committee for that reason.
I thank you, Councillor Melba.
Thank you. Councillor Hamid stole my thunder. Anyways, as someone who has sat on the interview committee, during a couple of terms. I share the same concerns Councillor Mead has based on the new rules and regulations. As we know, we sat there, and once the interviews have been completed, we rank, we discuss the merits of each candidate and make a decision and present that to council. This will make this, the way it's written now, that would make that very difficult. We could not do that, and I agree with Councillor Mead. The other concern I have is 5 members of council would sit on the interview committee. That's the majority of council. So basically, the decision made by the interview committee is the decision made by council before it even comes to council. The majority of councillors are on the interview committee as this. So based on the new regulation, my concerns about the politics, the other fact is sometimes we're interviewing candidates for a position. They are more qualified than we are. And yet we're interviewing them to see if they're qualified to sit in a certain location. I'd rather have staff not politicized, look at the based on merit alone, and make the recommendation to council. And again, we still have the final say. So I support, I agree with Councillor Hamid, and I'll be supporting to disband.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler?
Yes, Your Worship. I don't think that council is going to get particularly political. But what I do predict, Councillor Hamid, is the Christmas card volume is going to decline significantly, and maybe the dinner invitation volume as well. But it is kind of strange, though, that you know, at some point we're going to be discussing the treasurer's role. That's not going to be done in public. Yet this is being done in public. So maybe it's something to add to that list if a notice of motion goes through later this evening about impediments to our municipality doing business, because that is a serious impediment. And for that reason, not because I'm worried about a few less Christmas cards, I am going to support the disbanding of the committee for now, because I just think it puts us in a terrible position.
Thank you very much. Councillor Di Lorenzo.
I would just mention that the interview committee can still ask the town staff to rank applicants. It just having the interview committee in place allows us an opportunity to have all the candidates in an interview session where we can ask them questions, and allows councillors to get together and go through all the resumes as a group, and also interview the candidates all at the same time. Either way it happens, we can still ask town staff to do a ranking. And I agree actually with Councillor Chandler and Councillor Mead saying we are talking about specific individuals. So when we're talking about specific individual, I feel that's confidential. We're deciding on a specific individual, and some reason now that has to be public, while we talk about other specific individuals are allowed to make it confidential. So I really agree that I was disappointed in the Ombudsman's decision, because it seems to be handcuffing councils across Ontario. And I'd like to see more about how other councillors are resolving this. So far what I've seen is they're not going en masse and disbanding their interview committees. I see a greater benefit from there. If we do disband the interview committee, I understand from the clerk we can still ask for interviews as council as a whole. It becomes a little bit more political then. And I'll just let you know, I'll be asking for interviews all the time. So if you're saying you don't want politics, I'm just promising you it's going to occur, because I will be asking for candidates. If they want to be in a specific committee, I would like them to come before council and ask some direct questions. I would still like town staff to rank them, but I'm still going to ask those people to come before the council session, and then we are going to have some long council meetings. As long as the council is prepared for that, I'm fine as well.
Okay, I think, Mr. Clerk, a bit of clarification is needed, so go ahead.
Your Worship, I think there is a little bit of confusion. When you're talking about the people and their qualifications specifically, that is fine in camera. What you cannot do is start to rank the candidates, because by ranking you are voting on who should and who should not be on, and the voting has to be an open session. But when you discuss people specifically and their qualifications, that is fine in camera.
Councillor Di Lorenzo, you had the floor.
I had my last comment. I'm ready for the vote either way it goes.
Thank you, and so am I. Councillor Best. Oh, I got you first. Go ahead.
Just a question of clarification for the clerk, and Councillor Challoner highlighted earlier. When you're doing open session, can we just have candidate A, B, C, or D rather than the person's name? Because I could see us getting to real trouble here, basically, discussing and maybe having questions about people's abilities. Is that something, because I know on some other organizations I'm part of, just to protect the person's privacy, we don't let it be known even to the members. But this type of situation is, we've ranked them before, and it's no different than hiring a CAO or a department head, and I can't see why we can't do the same thing. We did the same thing on the Police Services Board, where we're hiring chiefs and deputy chiefs. We could do it in camera.
That's something that staff would have to look into, but if there is a way that meets the requirement of openness and transparency in the municipal rules, then we would do that in such a way as to respect the candidates, yet allow council to make an appropriate decision.
I hope we'll request staff to do that, because I could see our requests for applications going way down if they're going to be discussed in public.
I totally agree. It's just like someone that might be applying for a job where he or she, what do you do? Expose that person, and then their boss finds out, and and they're let go. So so it's not good. Councillor Lee.
I just want to let Councillor Di Lorenzo know that I have snacks. If the meetings go long, I have snacks.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott, and thank you for the...
One of the things you'll quickly learn that I don't permit cross-debate either, so. Councillor Hamid.
Yeah, quick question. So if we disbanded the committee tonight, can we form the committee again within this term through you, Mr. Mayor?
Your Worship, that would be a reconsideration of a previous decision. Require 2/3, but it's procedurally allowed.
So if we did not disband the committee tonight, in order to disband in the future, will that also require a 2/3 vote?
That is correct, because your decision tonight would be to retain status quo. So anytime you're changing a decision, it would be reconsideration, which would require 2/3.
All right, thank you. In that case, I'll stick with disbanding, because I have the same concern Councillor Best has, which is I don't think a lot of good, reasonable people who do not want to put themselves through public scrutiny will apply. It will be a huge discouragement, actually.
I agree with that comment, certainly. Councillor Di Lorenzo.
So if we disband, I just want a question to the clerk. If it's disbanded, but council members can still ask other candidates to be added for interviews somehow?
Yeah.
If the interview committee is disbanded, council sits in the place of the interview committee. What would change is that staff would write a confidential report listing all of the qualifications and all of the applicants. Council would decide whether or not it wishes to go in camera to discuss the individuals. If it does not go in camera, it would pass a resolution to the effect of that the staff recommendation contained in the confidential report be approved. That is what the public vote would be. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, I do not have any further speakers right at this moment. Let's just assume for a moment that I know I'm going to call for the vote on the disbanding in just a moment, but let's just assume for a moment that that doesn't carry. The point was made earlier on about the interview committee status quo with being 5 individual, and that, of course, now is a majority of council. Mr. Clerk, what could or should happen in that regard?
Your Worship, that would be totally up to council if it wants an interview committee of 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever the number is that council chooses.
I'm always conscious of, the majority of council getting together at any time, including the interview committee, so that's where I'm coming from on this.
One thing that I should clarify is that regardless of it being a majority of members of council, more than 50% of the committee would be members of council, so therefore it's a committee under the Municipal Act, which means it's subject to open meeting rules. which means you can only go in camera for certain items. So either way, regardless of numbers, council has to operate under those rules.
So it might as well be the whole council then. But yeah. Okay, so just something to think about, that's all. Okay. Okay, this is where the vote happens, and this is those in favor of disbanding the interview committee. Let's see your hands. Those opposed? Mr. Clerk? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Councilor Di Lorenzo, what was that one?
The Milton Economic Advisory Group. It used to be the advisory committee. I believe this just requires an amendment because I'm not going against. I'm totally in favor of changing the name and changing the rest of it. What I just wanted to see if I get council's agreement is instead of going from 3 to 1, we go from 3 to 2.
Is there a clerk is suggesting that if I have a seconder for that, we can deal with that rather quick. So again, Councilor Di Lorenzo, in fairness to everybody, you might just want to highlight that once again.
So it's under page 124.
Yeah.
The Economic Development Working Group, formerly known as the Milton Economic Development Advisory Group. So MEDEC does not currently operate as a committee of council, so we don't appoint the members. There's someone from Halton Region or someone from the town staff. It's a working group. It's going to meet. It doesn't provide minutes to council. So it's an informal meeting. While previously we had 3 council members, the town staff is to reduce from 3 to 1. If there are 2 council members here who would like to be on the advisory committee, I would like us to have that ability to still have 2 members on council on the advisory committee. So it's changing from previously we had 3 members on the advisory committee. The recommendation from staff is go from 3 to 1 member. I think there is an appetite for councillors to be on that committee, and I would like the ability to us to appoint 2 members from council on that working group.
I don't think we've got a seconder. Is anybody prepared to, Councillor Best, excuse me, is prepared to second it? Okay. Is everyone clear on what Councillor I am now as what he's advocating? It's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Tesser Dirksen.
Your Worship, I'm just wondering if Councillor Di Lorenzo would be able to provide some context as to why he thinks it would be beneficial to have 2 members of council on the committee.
Councillor Di Lorenzo?
So in the past, I was a member when we had 2. I was not a member when we had 3. I think from my understanding, when we went to 3, some members didn't always attend because 3 seemed like a lot of members on council. When I was a member, when there was 2 members, we had different viewpoints, different perspectives, maybe as a councillor from a different area of Milton, and I saw some benefit in some diverse discussions, input. So I still see with Milton now having a lower amount of wards and a lower amount of councillors, I think 2 members would still allow that input and dialogue and discussions and give some advice and into that working group for helping Milton attract new businesses and helping our economic development. I think if there's only 1 council member there, I don't think that would be as beneficial to the town of Milton as having some more, I guess, diverse members of council.
Councillor Tesser Dirksen.
Thank you very much. That's good.
Thank you. Councillor Hamid.
I just want to clarify something. So any member of council is still free to attend the working group at any point they like, 2 or 3 members, just through you, Mr. Wade. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so in that case, I mean, I don't see the difference. I can just drop by anytime my schedule fits. Thank you.
I do have a, I'm sorry, Councillor Challoner and Councillor Clute.
Yeah, I was going to mention the comment that Councillor Hamid made, but I would add that I was the founding chairman of MEDAC. There was one member of council, it was me, for 15 years. And, you know, various councillors had the opportunity, including the mayor, to attend as they so chose to do. But the primary purpose of it at that time was to engage as many members of the business community as possible and as few members of council. And I think that, you know, one is good. If somebody wants to attend, that's their right. But I don't think we need to formalize it in terms of more than one. So, you know, if you don't end up sitting on it, I encourage you to attend it anyway. But in my experience, it was fine with one member of council.
Mr. Cluett?
Thank you, Your Worship. Similar to what Councillor Challoner was mentioning, we did have 3, and we 2 of us had changed, had become co-chairs of that. But if anybody's worried about town input, town staff is quite available and is there. Our CAO sits, head of our economic development sits there as well, and other staff members. So I think one is fine, and like I said, if anybody else does want to show up, they can show up. It's a great committee to listen in on, but I think the primary importance is not just to have council or staff's opinion and input, it's the business community that we're after. Thank you.
No further speakers. Councillor Di Lorenzo?
I guess one question I have is, if one additional member shows up, usually on other committees like the library board, others I've seen, is the additional member that shows up is usually in the audience, not taking part with questions or dialogue. Is that the same? If it's not, then I would actually just withdraw my change right now.
The beauty of this is that council would be approving moving to an informal working group, and it would be up to staff and chair to operate the round table as it sees fit. So the formality is not there.
So let's not waste any more time. I will withdraw it right now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Best, you were next. You were the seconder of that.
Yeah, just a question on it. Could staff keep the rest of council informed of when these meetings are? Because I don't think they were published to the rest of council. So they could do that in future. I appreciate it.
Okay, that'll happen. Yeah, good. Yeah. Okay, that takes care of that. Councillor Di Lorenzo, you had another one, I believe.
I'm all good. The other one is Councillor Best's, the DBIA.
Yes, Your Worship, on page 124, the downtown business improvement area, and request us to reduce it by 1. I'd like to still stay on it, and I think we need 2 councillors on it, similar to the library board, Milton Hydro, because downtown Milton, if you might have noticed from last week's presentation, has a few challenges, such as the street festival, the official plan changes, the civic precinct study, and the mature neighborhood studies, and along with possible provincial changes. So I think having 2 people on, and I certainly welcome Councillor Tesser-Dirksen to be on the committee, because there's a few events to volunteer at too.
Okay, let's deal with the formality first. You move it. Okay, do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Tesser-Dirksen. Speaking to that motion. If nobody is speaking to it,
the motion is to increase the recommendation to 2.
Yeah. Those in favor of that motion? That's carried. Okay, Councillor Best, did you have anything else?
Oh, that's all. I'm just going to get Councillor Tesser-Dirksen a vest now.
Yeah, Councillor Challoner, I know that you had mentioned the library as well.
Yes, Your Worship. I think that it needs to be an odd number. That works with Robert's Rules of Order, and it always has been an odd numbered board. I said odd numbered board, Councillor Cluett. Anyways, I think that reducing it to 7 would be appropriate, and from 8 as recommended. It leaves it as an odd number.
While retaining 2 council members?
Yes.
Okay, that's very clear. And you have moved that, Councillor Challoner?
Yes.
Second by Councillor Best. Speaking to that motion? Being none, those in favor of that motion? That's carried. Okay, Mr. Clerk. Now, this will be as revised or as amended. And again, you heard me read this out earlier on, members of council. Is there anything further on the resolution? Again, it was moved by Councillor Di Lorenzo and second by Councillor Challoner. If not, those in favor of the motion? That's carried. Resolution moved by Councillor Best and seconded by Councillor Di Lorenzo, and be it resolved that the forecast changes and associated entries that result in a forecasted year-end surplus position of $422,248 for 2018, including $406,870 identified in the third quarter, be approved as outlined in this report. That a new reserve fund called Arts Programming Reserve Fund be established in accordance with Appendix 2. That a one-time transfer in the amount of $596.15 be made from the investment in the Arts Reserve Fund to the Arts Programming Reserve Fund. Any questions on this resolution, this report? Being none, those in favor of that motion? And that's carried. A resolution moved by Councillor Chandler and seconded by Councillor Cluett, and be it resolved that whereas the province of Ontario has over many years implemented legislation that has made it financially and operationally difficult for the town of Milton to deliver programs and services to its various publics as effectively and as efficiently as the town deems appropriate. And whereas some, but not all, of these legislative impediments have been identified by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, known as FCM, the Auditor General of Ontario, and the Independent Financial Commission of Inquiry. Therefore, be it resolved that the 5 departments plus the library that make up the town of Milton's identify those specific pieces of provincial legislation that most severely financially and operationally impair their abilities to achieve their stated mandates and should be rescinded or revised. And further, the town staff report back to Milton Council before March 31st, 2019 with their findings, including identifying financial and service level impacts so that Council can communicate these concerns in a timely fashion to the Premier of Ontario. The Cabinet Minister and ministries responsible, the Member of Provincial Parliament for Milton, AMO, FCM, the Regional Municipality of Halton, area municipalities, and other agencies, boards, and commissions where appropriate. Councillor Chandler, you're the mover, and I know that you alluded to this earlier on. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just very briefly, ironically, when I put this together, we got a letter from Steve Clark, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, essentially inviting us to do exactly this. So it really just codifies his letter to us. The province currently is looking at reducing red tape for the business community. It just makes sense for municipalities to also engage the province in terms of the red tape that they see, and Clark has alluded to that. And so I know in my history, I experienced some things here before where we didn't probably take advantage of the opportunity to ask the province about some pieces of legislation that probably should have been rescinded or reviewed and revised. So I think let's take this opportunity. We're likely entering into a period of core services review, and there may be provincial legislation that may impede us potentially. So let's get that out on the table through staff, correspond with the organizations I've identified, and see if we can streamline the decision-making process that impacts us in the province of Ontario.
Certainly concur with that. Councillor Cluett, as seconder.
Very similar comments. It's just we're now going to be obviously with the new provincial government that's in place. We've seen at the pace that they are making changes, doing things. it's imperative upon us to have as much ammunition as possible. When we go down to visit ministers, as you've seen, municipal leaders from all over the province have been going down to Queen's Park. I'm sure that we'll be standing in line as well down the road, and as long as we have AMO conferences are coming up, anything that we can have as ammunition to help improve what we have here in the corporation of the town of Milton. So I'm all for it, and I'm seconding it.
Thank you, Councillor Best.
Yes, Your Worship, I agree with the mover and seconder on these areas. Just two of the issues that the AMO is working on, as you're quite familiar with, is arbitration awards, and we've had a lot of financial impact there, as well as joint and severable liability. It's one thing that we're also, with the new government, also talking about with the memorandum of understanding, to make sure that we are getting our fair share of taxes, not only at the provincial level but locally, because we've gone through uploading and downloading, and we want to make sure that everything's done right. And I agree with the situation is, do we have the tools to do the job? And sometimes we don't have them. Sometimes there's no rules. And actually, Councillor Mead highlighted that. When we look at the Cairns debate, we have to keep on to this, and this is a great way to start, because we have the Roma conference coming up in the end of January. At the executive of AMO now, we're highlighting some of these areas because we're finding that the province wants to do things. Well, here's our shopping list of things that we need, and I appreciate the motion.
I thank you very much, and again, for all members of council and the general public out there, that Councillor Best has been on the AMO board, but now chairs the, I think it's a single-tier regional. Correct me, Councillor Best.
Its
I know your
official title is Regional and Single-Tier Caucus. It's almost as bad as my old ward name. Okay.
So Councillor Best takes quite an active role in there, not only for the region of Halton, but for the province, and I thank him publicly very much for that and keeping us in tune as to what's evolving. So thank you. Is there any further discussion on this motion? If not, those in favor of the motion, and that's carried. Item number 6, as mentioned by the clerk, and his amendments and changes earlier on, has been withdrawn. Resolution moved by Councillor Best and seconded by Councillor Di Lorenzo, and be it resolved, the bylaws numbers 109, 2018 through and including 120, 2018 be read, passed, and numbered. The mayor and the town clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaws, seal them with the seal of the corporation, and that they be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any questions on these readings of these bylaws? Being none, those in favor of the motion. That's carried. Regional council update. Again, we've had our inaugural and one other session. So, Councillor Best.
Yes, Your Worship, just in our next Planning and Public Works Committee, which I'm now joined by Councillor Cluett. It's good to have some company now, even though you're still facing 3 Burlington and Oakville councillors each. We are basically having a presentation regarding the budget overview and also an update regarding the boil water advisory that all the regional councillors got a brief update, but I'm expecting a more detailed one later this next month.
Have you anything? Councillor Hamid.
Nothing really. We got the budget documents. I would encourage the public to look at the budget document at halton.ca and give us any feedback they might have. Thank you.
Councillor Melba.
Nothing to add to what's been said. I might have after the next meeting, though.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure most of us will. One thing that I would mention, of course, the committee structure has been set. The only thing that's still outstanding is the chairs and vice chairs of each one of those respective committees, and that'll be happening this week. So we'll know who's the chair and vice chair of those 3 major standing committees. So with that, that's all that I have. Okay, now we had talked about earlier on, Councillor Chandler has a disclosure and a conflict on this motion here. Is there any member of council that wishes to go into camera to discuss this item? Okay, being none, then again, we will proceed, and again, Councillor Chandler has a disclosure on it. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Ali and seconded by Councillor Tesser-Dirksen. Be it resolved that recommendations contained in staff report COMS-008-18 be approved. Any questions on this resolution? Being none, those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Clerk, have you and I forgotten anything? Okay, members of council, just before I adjourn this council meeting, I want to take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And the same goes to not only all the residents of Milton and or Halton, but everyone out there, the very season's best. So with that, members of council, Councillor Cluett?
Sorry, I didn't. I just wanted to, just trying to give you a little hint to talk about the levy. That's
yeah,
January 1st.
Yeah, and again, Mr. Clerk, I'm going to break procedure here just a little bit. Okay? I can always be challenged on that too. But I think Councillor Cluett makes mention the New Year levy. Of course, here is at the Town Hall. Of course, on January 1st, and I stand corrected on this. I think it's from 1 to 3. I don't have any notes with me, from 1 to 3. And of course, the bell ringing as well is in Victoria Park on New Year's Eve at exactly 11:30. And of course, the bell will be rang to ring in the new year at exactly midnight. So every member of council is welcome. I know some of you quite often turn up. Also, all members of the public show up as well. So all we hope for is a half-decent evening then as well. So has anybody else anything further to add? I open myself for criticism on this, I know that, so yeah, and that's fine. With that, Mr. Clerk, this meeting is now adjourned. This concludes council meeting for year 2018. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.